Hi, James. This is Chris Meyer. Thank you for coming onto my podcast today. I'm a family law attorney, and my understanding you're in immigration law. You practice in Houston, and we wanted to talk about domestic violence, kind of what you see and what remedies are available for victims. So, yeah, tell us a little bit about yourself, and we can go from there.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. Well, first off, you and I graduates 2014 of TMSL, so, always been a real pleasure to know you. Been practicing here ever since graduation, and I focus mainly on immigration. And what I like, and I'm going to fanboy out on you for a second, but I like that you've taken up this cause about helping victims of domestic violence, because this is very much a community that's been, I don't want to say underprotected, but, you're giving a voice to the voiceless. And I've kept up with your career. I've kept up with your podcast. And I kind of thought, well, there's avenues in immigration that'll help victims of domestic violence, whether it's a woman, whether it's a, and if somebody is helped by this podcast, I mean, like that's really what you want. But before this, I was a teacher in Laredo for about 8 years. Decided to go to law school, went to law school, graduated, stayed in the Houston area. I have my office over in Sharpstown, 6666 Harwin, and been doing mostly immigration, criminal, personal injury. Don't do too much family law, but I know, there's attorneys like you that can really step up and help these people, so I can stay out of your realm. But I'm really excited to talk about these two things that can help immigrant citizens, even citizens that have immigrant friends, which I did want to focus kind of on the U visa and VAWA, which are two processes in the immigration field that can help victims of domestic violence.
Okay, so tell me, what is a U visa? What is VAWA? And, I guess, what's the target population for each? And how are they similar? How are they different?
Okay, perfect. Yeah, so in my practice, I deal mostly with Latin American clients, Guatemala, Mexico, El Salvador, Honduras, and they're very much part of what's referred to as a machismo culture, a machistic culture where, it's very male-centric. And when they come to the U.S., a lot of them assimilate into American culture where, we're very much equal with women, but they bring that kind of belief here and they want to continue that. And unfortunately, it's the woman that suffers. And for years and years and years, this was going underreported, or the female or the abused male would be afraid to report because, again, they're here without status, so they're afraid that if they report their husband or they report their wives, they'll get deported. Well, in the late 90s, early 2000s, they came up with the Violence Against Women Act. And also they created what's called a U visa, which is a type of visa like a student visa, tourist visa, but it's a U visa. And to kind of give an overview of both, a U visa is a relationship between two immigrants, two non-citizens, where if one is a abuser of the other, then they can get status if they meet certain requirements. VAWA, on the other hand, is between a citizen and a non-citizen. So if the partner or the spouse is a citizen, they can apply through VAWA, which is Violence Against Women Act. This process is faster. It's a little bit more, it's somewhat easier to win. But the big difference is that one is between two immigrants, two non-citizens, and one is between a citizen and a non-immigrant.
Okay, so if an immigrant came to you with an immigration issue and said, "I'm also a victim of violence," is it safe for them to report this to the police, or do they run the risk of possibly being deported because they made a police report but they're not here, they're not a citizen, or I mean, is there any risk reporting this to the police? Would that affect their immigration status? Or
That's a really great question, and the whole reason the U visa and the VAWA was designed was to assist in capturing abusers. Because again, prior to this, it was very much, I don't want to get involved because if I write a police report, well, guess what? I'm availing myself to the government and I'm in trouble of getting deported. And so these programs, the U visa and VAWA, is designed to protect the immigrant. And so, for example, for a U visa, you have to meet certain requirements, and those requirements are reporting the crime, because I do get people coming in and say, hey, I'm a victim of abuse. I want to do the U visa. Well, my first question is, well, did you report it? Well, no, I didn't report it. Well, now you're no longer eligible. If you reported it, but then you didn't want to press charges, well, you're not eligible, because the whole purpose of a U visa is that, one, you have to have been the victim of a crime, which in this case, focusing on domestic violence. Domestic violence, immigration takes very seriously. You can get asylums based on domestic violence. And you had to have suffered, whether it's physical or mental abuse. Now, you had to have information that you gave to the police. That's one of the requirements. And that you were helpful in the prosecution, meaning that you didn't report it, and then the police say, hey, well, do you want to press charges? And you say no. Well, now you don't meet the requirements anymore. And so you prove this because the first step in a U visa is you have to send the police, whichever police you went to, what's called a supplement B. And the police have to sign off saying that you were helpful. If they don't sign that, then your case is done, because the police are basically telling the government, hey, this person wasn't helpful in what we were trying to do. So it's the same.
Has it been your experience? Are the police usually pretty good about signing it as long as there is cooperation?
If you can do it soon, yes. Because if you could get it done within 2 years, that's usually statute of limitations isn't the correct word, but that's kind of the time limit that people will give you, because if you do it sooner, well, then the investigator it's still fresh in his mind, and they'll sign it pretty quickly. But if you're coming in 5 years later, I've had the DA send back letters, or the police send back letters saying, no, man, the case is too old. We're not going to do it. So it has to be done within a reasonable amount of time. But to answer your question, the whole purpose of the U visa and the VAWA was to put these people behind bars, because if you're abusing a woman or you're abusing a man, you should suffer the consequences. And for a lot of years previously, they were getting away with it because they knew, my wife's not going to go to the police because I could just have her deported. And that's why they made these two processes that you can do now.
Is there when people come to your office and talk about family violence, do you have to dispel a lot of myths?
I have to kind of teach them how they should be treated in the U.S.
Okay. And
it's something that you, I, my wife, your wife, and for most people that we take for granted. It's not good to beat your spouse. It's illegal, and it's illegal to treat people, and it's just not the way you're supposed to treat somebody. But I do get a lot of people coming to the office, and it's like the way they described how they live, and it's like, you left a certain situation in your home country to come to a place where you're considered an equal, first off. And so it's more teaching these, really the majority of them are female, that teaching them that, wait a minute, you're here because you wanted a better life, and you don't need to come here and live the same way you were living in your home country. And so that's kind of the biggest myth is, or the biggest thing I have to do is to explain to them that, you're here, you want to keep your Latin culture, but you also want to assimilate to how you should be treated in the United States.
Okay, makes perfect sense. So that, a lot about you, Visa, but tell me a little bit about like VAWA. What can we expect there, and what's other specific criteria?
Okay, VAWA in the realm of immigration, it's easier and it's harder. It's kind of both. Because VAWA, you do what's called a self-petition. Because normally when you petition, you're petitioning based on somebody that has status. For example, your spouse that's a U.S. citizen, your parents that's a U.S. citizen, your child that's a U.S. citizen, a sibling that's a U.S. citizen. Here, you self-petition, which means you're petitioning yourself because you're saying that, one, you had a relationship with a U.S. citizen or a resident, but that's the whole thing. But you had a relationship, whether it's common law marriage, whether it's marriage, that you're no longer with the person, so you have to get divorced, and that you were the victim of domestic violence. And you prove that with police reports. Again, same thing. You're having to show that you did suffer, medical records, things like that. And then you apply under what's called an I-360, which is a self-petition, and you can basically adjust your status. Adjusting your status means you can get your residency without having to go back to your home country. The benefit of a VAWA is you can apply for your work permit immediately. Now, your work permit is good because your work permit allows you to work in the U.S. legally. You get your driver's license and drive legally, and you get to have a temporary Social Security number so you can pay taxes, you can start building all that stuff up. The only drawback is that it's very, 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 very difficult to prove, and here's why. Because you know and I know that not every lawyer is 100% above board. And it's a very sad thing. It's a very unwritten thing that there are a lot of sketchy attorneys in our field. I think we both know that.
Yeah.
And so what they would do, and this is how they abused the VAWA, is that they would make up a complete fake VAWA petition. Hey, I was abused by my husband. Husband never abused them. So they submit all this evidence that's not a police report, but, statements. And you would get all the benefits of a VAWA without having won it yet, but you get the benefits. They use that and they go out of the country and they come back, because for most processes, you need one valid entry into just because a lot of these people come undocumented. You need one valid entry. So they abuse the VAWA to get permission to leave the country, come back, and then they terminate the VAWA. Hey, you know what? The VAWA was, I'm getting back together with my husband, so we're fine. Well, eventually the government caught up to that. And they said, wait a minute. It happened with this one attorney, I think in New York, because he had 500 VAWA cases that were all terminated before it got finished.
Wow.
The idiot got too greedy, and the government's like, wait a minute, you have 500 VAWA cases, and all of a sudden you're like, no. And then they would be able to adjust their status here because they have the U.S. citizen husband or wife, the valid entry. So now all they have to do is, it's an immediate adjustment, but that's completely illegal. And the guy, lost his bar, arrested, all that good stuff that should happen to him. But now, for us that do it the right way, well, now it's like you have to prove the moon and the stars in a VAWA. And I remember I had a case a few years ago where she had written down, like, you know, you have to list your previous addresses. So she listed them for as much as you can remember, because I can't remember the last places I lived. And so, you know, she wrote down her thing and we submitted it, comes back, and they're like, hey, wait a minute. According to this, in, you know, 1997, you lived here, but our records show that you lived here. So what's the deal? And so she just said, I forgot. And so we sent a letter saying, hey, she just forgot. Here's proof. And they denied it.
Wow.
They were like, no, we think we're not going to go as far as to say you're committing fraud, but because there's a discrepancy, we're not going to allow it. And so VAWA was very much tightly controlled because it was abused for so long. And it's kind of the sad stuff that, you know, people see a little bit of what they call a loophole, or what they consider a loophole, but really it's just doing something very illegal. And how it ruins it kind of for the rest of the other ones that have a true.
Okay, well, as a divorce lawyer, what I do, and I have a client who comes to me who's a non-citizen, but they're married to a citizen, and I get her a protective order. The court makes a finding that family violence has happened. I showed all the pictures to the judge. I showed the videos, you know, pictures of bruises around the neck. Okay. I showed all that to the judge. I get her protective order. So a protective order, will that satisfy a VAWA, our I-360 self-petition? Since
it'll get her foot in the door.
Okay.
Because the good thing about immigration, I mean, some of the lawyers think it's a pain in the butt, but it's good because they'll never outright deny something. It's very, very rare that you're just going to get a full-on no from immigration. They're going to send what's called a RFE, which is a request for evidence, or what's called a NOID, a notice of intent to dismiss. And those letters are basically saying, look, here's the issues that we're having with your case. We'll give you 33 days and explain everything. So normally I've had stuff like that where we've sent the protective order, but normally we'll get a RFE, a request for evidence, saying, okay, the protective order, that's a foot in the door, but what else did she do? Did she, because remember the purpose of this is to punish people, punish the persecutor. They may say, hey, a protective order is a civil matter. What did you do to get this guy punished? And do you have a police report? Do you have something? And depending on which officer gets that case, he may say, you know what? She attacked him civilly, but he's not going to suffer any criminal repercussions for this, so they'll deny it. Or you may be a sympathetic officer that'll allow it. So it's kind of a toss-up because it is dependent. It's discretionary on the officer, too.
Okay. No, I mean, and I'm not really going into the criminal aspect. If somebody, beats their spouse and they get arrested and they go to jail, okay, maybe that's different, but that's kind of outside this discussion if somebody gets a criminal conviction. But I'm just working on the civil side, just the family court, which is, civil in nature, and protective orders are civil in nature. But I'm able to present evidence that family violence, did happen. And what about other types of evidence, like photographs, things that would normally come out during the discovery if there was maybe a big divorce and there's family violence, accusations of family violence? What comes out in the discovery, would that be helpful with the I-360, like pictures and text messages of somebody admitting abuse? Or
the way I would describe it, you've had those applications or something where it's like, okay, we can use your driver's license for identification because it has your name, address, and a photo. If you don't have your license, well, then you go to step B, which is 2 forms of identification. If you don't have these, then you have to go to Group C, which is like 3 forms of identification. You ever seen those? It basically functions the same way. If you have a police report, that's, you're pretty much good to go because you've done that. To me, in my experience, civil matters are kind of like that form, that Group B.
Okay.
So yeah, you would have the restraining order, you would have the photos, you may even have text messages from the guy saying, hey, if you don't come back to me, I'm going to beat you up. That could satisfy for that kind of that Group B of evidence. And then again, a lot of immigration is discretionary, and there's thousands of officers. So you may get a sympathetic officer that will allow that, or you may get a not sympathetic officer that'll say, no, that's not enough, and either issue the request for evidence or intent to dismiss, and then you would have to kind of figure that next part out.
Okay. So yeah, I understand. It's definitely a high burden. But you said VAWA petitions seem to be a little bit more successful than U visa.
Yes, because it's easier to prove if you have the correct evidence. Because how do you prove a relationship? You submit your marriage license. Then it just checks off the box. You know what I mean? It's not I don't know. It checks off the box. Are you no longer with this person? If there's a divorce decree or a restraining order, okay, box is checked. You're no longer with this person. Did you report this to the police? Check. Because here's a police report. So it's easier in that sense because the evidence that they want is not very, you have to kind of explain it. It either is or it isn't. It's either black or white. You have it or you don't. And that's why VAWA is easier and it's faster because U visas can take up to 7-8 years to complete.
Oh, wow.
VAWAs are about 2 years if you have all the evidence. And during that time, you can apply for your work permit. But because the type of evidence that is required for a VAWA is so much easier to prove, it's an easier thing to do. Because again, relationship, dissolution of your relationship, evidence of abuse, those 3 are the boxes that you check, and you're good to go.
Okay, now does the immigration office, do they give you like a hearing where you can present evidence and oral arguments, or is it really just like transactional, like paperwork?
It's 100% by paperwork.
Okay.
That's why you kind of have to have all your evidence in a row, and kind of like how you do it with your restraining orders. You have to prove it in a sense that anybody could kind of see, like prima facie, there's abuse going on. Kind of the same thing is that, can you prove A, B, C, D? And if you could have evidence for A, B, C, D, you submit it in the packet, and then you just wait for your turn to get it seen in front of an officer. And again, they'll never outright deny it. You either get a letter saying you've been accepted, here's the next steps, or you'll get a letter saying, here's where we have the issues. Prove that you deserve this residency based on your abuse.
Do they get some type of stay or during the waiting period? They're not going to adjust their status or take any action against the immigrant while we're waiting on the U visa or the VAWA to be reviewed, or can other things happen during this period?
The stay, you get a stay because normally kind of the rule is, and I don't know if it's a rule or a law, but basically if you have something pending, they won't deport you. If you have a pending asylum, they're not going to deport you. But kind of the benefit is that, and I think it was they've always done it for VAWA. I think it's been a recent change for U visa, but you can apply for your work permit while you're waiting for them to make a decision on your case.
Okay.
So kind of when you apply, at the same time you're filing what's called an I-765, which is your work permit. And they're going to review it, but they're going to review it real briefly. And then they're going to give you a paper saying prima facie eligibility. I can't remember what prima facie meant. I think it just means that, like, at first glance, you have everything. So, for example, for a VAWA person, you know, an officer is going to get it real briefly, and then he's trying to prove that the four things, you know, relationship, no longer relationship, abuse. So he looks at the file real quickly. Hey, marriage license, cool. Divorce, cool. Okay, here's a restraining order, cool. Hey, I think at first glance she's eligible, so they're going to say, hey, you know what? While we do a deeper dive, we're going to give you your work permit, which again, work permit, driver's license, and social security number. And hey, work, pay your taxes, drive, and you'll be fine as long as you don't do anything crazy and get in trouble with the police.
Okay. And that's kind of a practical question because a domestic violence lawyer, I'll kind of briefly explain where I'm coming from. When lots of, I'm not a pro bono lawyer. I don't have the ability or the bandwidth to, you know, I have to charge money because I have to pay my employees. I have overhead, you know, I have to do that. And I tell victims that there are free resources out there like AVDA, Advocates for Victims of Domestic Abuse. You go to avda.org. It's a free resource. But the way they're structured is it's mainly focused for people who are indigent, like who are poor. You know, they can't normally afford a lawyer. So usually what has happened several times is typically a woman is abused, like physically abused or assaulted by her partner, husband, you know, whatever. And they called the police, like HPD, Houston Police Department. And I know HPD, their domestic violence department is overwhelmed. And I'm not going to speak for HPD, but I'm just telling my observations. Is it looks like they really want like slam dunk cases. If it's not slam dunk, then it's marginal, and they'll say, okay, go to VAWA. Go to AVDA. And then they go to AVDA, and AVDA they have a screening process, and they find out, oh, you have assets, you have a job, you have money. Suddenly the response is, well, we're backed up over a year. You might need to talk to a private lawyer. If you're indigent, if you're poor, it's been my observation that they'll offer quicker protections to victims if you're indigent, because I think that's just how their funding is set up. And again, I'm not speaking on behalf of AVDA or HPD, just my observations. So somebody goes to HPD, knocks on their door, they're not able to get the help. So they go to AVDA, they knock on their door, not able to kind of get the help that they need. So now they come to me, and by the time they come to me, they've already asked around, and these are, you know, and I will help them with their protective order and things like that. But I do charge a fee. Well, I guess my question to you is there funding? Is there support set up like things like including shelters, things like that for VAWA victims, or is it or pro bono lawyers in that area, are they kind of few and far between? So what happens is the victim, they still have to retain an attorney? How does that work?
That's a good question, because obviously I'm in the same boat as you. Solo lawyers, overhead, it's difficult, you know, because you want to help all these people because, you know, they don't have the means to pay for a lot of things. But, you know, thankfully, in a city the size of Houston, there are a lot of places that will help. For immigration, you have Catholic Charities. That's located in the uptown in Houston. Catholic Charities may be able to help. I know a Bridge Over Troubled Waters, which is a women's shelter. I've heard they do great things because, again, for at least the U visas, and you need the signature of the police. The police is not going to deny a U visa supplement B from a Bridge Over Troubled Water, which is a domestic violence shelter. I mean, that's horrible if they do. You know, so same with VAWA is that if you're going to a women's shelter, it's like how we talked about all that kind of tertiary evidence. You don't have the police report, but you have A, B, C, D, and E. If you stayed a few days at a women's shelter, well, that's going to kind of prove that you were a victim because that women's shelter believes you. So they can help. Catholic Charities is there. Furthermore, Spanish speaking, there's FIEL, F-I-E-L. I don't know what it stands for, but they help a lot with immigrant rights. And I'm pretty sure every ethnicity has their group, because there's a lot of groups here, a lot of ethnicities, and they have, I think, some of the African communities have, I forgot what it's called, but something boat. But they have those groups that will help for little to no cost. And it's just a matter of, asking your community where's the best place to go. And a lot of people understand that because, again, I'll help where I can, but these processes are so intensive that it's very hard to do pro bono. I completely agree with you on that. But in Houston, at least, there's a lot of places that if you look around, you'll find it.
Yeah. There's a lot of resources in Houston. It's just, in my experience, some of the victims that need the most help, their cases are complex, lengthy, and I could get them a protective order, but they still have to deal with a nasty divorce. They still have to deal with property division, child custody stuff, rights, who's going to make the educational, medical, and dental decisions for the child support, if any, and then suddenly the obligor spouse is suddenly unemployed. And now we're like, okay, how are we going to get child support? It's just this incredible mess. And it's going to be expensive, but they have little way to pay for it. But, I understand, like, ABDA maybe help them with a protective order, or HPD could get them a protective order for free, but they still have this complicated legal issue on the back end,
And to jump on that, in my area, you do have the citizens that will heavily intimidate the non-citizen because the immigrant doesn't know their rights. And so you have the citizen saying, if you don't give me what I want in a divorce, I'm going to have you deported, or I'm going to call ICE on you. And unfortunately, because they don't have the legal knowledge, they believe it, and they'll sign whatever is in front of them. And in the case of an immigrant versus another immigrant, you do get that same kind of thing. You do get that heavy intimidation of what are you going to do? I'm the one that works. I'm the one that pays for everything. You can't work because you don't have any status. So if I leave you, where are you going to go? You have no money, no way to get money, and your family's back in Honduras or El Salvador. And it kind of, these people are almost held hostage in their own marriage, essentially.
No, and that's spot on. It's absolutely correct. And it's not just like the Latin community. I see it in other communities as well, where people come here and their passports being held, and it almost starts looking like a human trafficking situation. And in a way it is.
Oh yeah, very much so. Very much where there's a lot of definitions to being held hostage. Financial hostage, I'll take your kids away hostage. And it's very much, they understand that something's wrong, but they're so afraid to ask anything because either A, they have no way to pay for themselves or for their kids, and just to dispel a rumor, because I do hear this a bunch, immigrants can't get Medicaid. Like I get that from a lot of people that will argue with me. It's like, well, they just get Medicaid. Immigrants can't get Medicaid. It's a rumor that's out there. It's a truth, or it's a statement that's made, but it's never been true. They do get a lot of help from those clinics. You've seen them on the side of the road. Those Hispanic clinics, Clínica Legal or Clínica España, and those are the ones that will help for very little cost. But You know, it's very much a form of kidnapping almost in a sense where they can't leave because they can't leave their kids. They don't have the money to leave. Or in the case of a VAWA where it's a citizen against a non-immigrant, once you hear the U.S. citizen say, hey, if you leave me or if you don't do what I say, I'm calling ICE and they'll be here today. And then what do?
What's the response time on ICE for like couples fighting? Zero, like no response?
No, where the quickest response is if they call the police.
Okay. But
Because
but trying to get someone deported, when it's like really just like a family matter, like, ICE kind of ignores it.
very much so, because they're looking for criminals. You know, a lot of the times you hear like these ICE raids, you know, the main ones that get reported in the news are like, hey, they went to this, you know, factory. Those are rare. What ICE is looking for are criminals. Like if you have 1 felony, 2 felonies, DWIs, I mean, like, hey, you're here, you can't be committing crimes. I mean, like, that's what I tell, cause I do criminal law for immigrants, and it's like, you know, dude, you're here, but you're not supposed to be here. And they've been here for so long, 5, 10 years, that they wanna act like, you know, that they can do this, and nothing will happen. And it's like, I have clients that end up in deportation proceedings, and it's like, well, I had a speeding ticket. It's like, yeah, but you were going 20 miles over the limit. A citizen's going to get away with it. They're going to give him a ticket, send him on his way, but they're going to look in your background, see you're not supposed to be here, and guess what? You're going to be deported because you're not supposed to be committing crimes here.
Yeah.
But to answer your question, you know, if they say, if the citizen calls and says, hey, my wife's here illegally, I want you to pick her up. I mean, ICE isn't stupid. I mean, they're kind of pains in the ass sometimes and I have to deal with them, but they're not stupid. They're gonna let the courts handle that because they know what they're doing. You know, they know what the situation is.
It's always been my I mean, I don't do immigration law, but it's always been my interpretation of the situation that ICE, they prioritize like gangs and criminals, but like people who are not committing crimes and they're just kind of minding their own business, they kind of get left alone. Is kind of my interpretation.
And you know, obviously you have your opinion. Everybody has their opinion. My opinion is, hey, if you're not committing crimes and you have a little bit of chance to kind of find a way to get status, go for it. But if you're here, like I have a client, he came here without documents, and he was like so happy. Him and his cousins went out to party. Well, he gets a DWI, and I mean, like, the ICE was like quick to just get him into proceedings and get him out of here. And he's like, well, what? Why? It's like, dude, you literally got here, and 5 hours later you committed a crime. What were you expecting to happen? Of course, ICE is going to come after you. You know?
Yeah.
And so I, you know, what you're thinking is correct. ICE is looking for criminals.
Yeah.
They're not looking for, you know, the housewife that's in a divorce that the husband calls ICE on.
Yeah, that's kind of what I figured, but I could see how maybe retaliation, like if a wife calls the police on her husband and she wants to exercise her rights under VAWA, he could retaliate in other ways. He could try to call ICE and say, hey, she's here doing this, this, and that. She has marijuana. She smells like marijuana. I don't know. Want her deported, you know, and ICE is just not going to prioritize it.
Very rare. I mean, that guy would have to be like Matthew McConaughey level actor for them to even like remotely consider going after that person.
No, I feel ICE. They have their priorities are correct. You know, they focus on the criminals, focus on the gang members. Other people they can kind of leave alone. That's
and I don't know why Matthew McConaughey came up. I think he won an Oscar, so I think my analogy is correct.
I know. Well, I kind of, at some level, I kind of have to be an actor too, because I have to know how to, when to turn it on and when to turn it off, or I get out of a very heated hearing and I'm all pumped up, but then afterwards I have to do a consultation for a name change, so I have to kind of tone it back down,
Yeah, I could imagine a juiced up name change consultation.
Yeah, I have to kind of I get out of a protective order hearing where it's very emotional, and then somebody wants to do like the name change, and I have to just kind of know your audience, calm down.
Yeah, I understand those ebbs and flows, but it makes the job more interesting. So
never boring, my friend.
Yeah.
Family law is everything. You experience every single possible emotion humanly possible, but you'll never experience boredom. That is the one thing you'll never experience in family law.
And I experienced all those emotions before lunch.
I know, right? No, it was like that. I was taking bullets to the courtroom for my client this morning. It was awkward.
Yeah, that's why. I mean, I'll be very honest. As soon as I was financially able to not do family law, I dropped that like a hot potato, because it takes very special people like you and those other ones I see going into the civil courthouse that you need a specific mentality to be a family law lawyer that I don't.
You have to. I call it. I have a respect for the circumstantial complexity of family law and what goes into it. It's just, some people call it a dumpster fire. I call it circumstantial complexity. So,
yeah, I'm in the dumpster fire community.
That's awesome. All right,
yeah.
cool. All right, well, hey, I want to thank you for your time. It's been a great interview. I'll get this published, and also I'm going to leave your contact information down in the article portion associated with the podcast. So I hope I can help you out in that way.
Oh yeah, thank you so much. It like we had talked about off the air, and now, if this helps one person, I mean, that's all you want to do in life, is just help people, and hopefully that person helps somebody or know somebody that needs this type of help. And if I could be a small part of your crusade, then hell yeah, man, I'm down 100% for it.
Well, I'm in a lifelong battle against narcissism and protecting victims, so it's always fun, and it is definitely a crusade. It's a war. All right, thank you, my friend.
Anything else, give me a call. I'm always here for you. All right.
All right, thanks, brother. We'll be in touch. Bye bye.
All right, take care. Bye.